Hey everyone, David here, back again to review some more S.H.I.E.L.D. and this time it is for the third episode of Season 3, entitled A Wanted, parentheses in, parentheses out, human. I'm so sorry about that. And this week we finally catch up with Lincoln and him being on the run after the ATCU, the other version of S.H.I.E.L.D., the more nefarious version of S.H.I.E.L.D., is out there trying to capture Lincoln and other Inhumans, and in order to do so, they go ahead and pull the drastic move, and possibly foolish move, of basically putting him out in the public and saying, hey, if you see this guy, capture him. So now this forces Lincoln to be on the run, going from place to place. He even tries to crash at this one dude's place that he knew before this whole thing went down. But then he conveniently, which is one of the iffy moments of this episode, conveniently figures out that he is actually on the run, and they say that he killed people, whatever, and this causes him to indirectly kill him, and so he's on the run, going back and forth, and S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson, and Mac are trying to find a way to keep tabs on this guy, while at the same time trying to rescue him and keep him from falling into the hands of I want to say the bad guys, but Rosalind makes it clear in this episode that they're not Hydra, they're not the one killing the Inhumans. There's another team out there, there's something else out there doing that, and it's not her team, it's not her organization. But they're both striving to achieve the same goal, bringing in humans, just in a very different way, very black and white sort of way. And so Coulson is simply just trying to beat Rosalind to the punch, and S.H.I.E.L.D. is having a much more emotional attachment to this whole picture here, because obviously this is the guy who brought her into that sanctuary back in Season 2 and practically introduced her to her mother. So obviously Lincoln is a very big part of Daisy's life, and so she has a much more emotional investment in this whole thing. And so that one scene that they had with one another inside the apartment when they were alone was a very tender moment. I really liked it. And of course things just come crushing down. And that entire plot of him being on the run, the only thing that I didn't really like about it is the fact that we kind of end up in the same place. I mean, Lincoln is practically on the run still, and he escapes, and it was kind of like a one-off with him, but still, I understand it. Plus, I might be in the minority here, but I like that Coulson actually decided to join Rosalind in the capturing of the Inhumans. He's just hoping that maybe along the way he'll be able to convince them to not capture them in the most negative manner, and hopefully use much more tactical approaches so that they feel like they could be part of a very much more positive society rather than be looked at as like these monsters. And I like that Coulson even referenced that other S.H.I.E.L.D. that we saw in Season 2, and how it's almost like a meta moment where the show recognized that us viewers don't want to see a retread of that plot. So Coulson even says, I'm done doing this, I'm not going to do that all over again practically, so let's just join with them instead of trying to fight them like before. And so this is going to make for some interesting friction, because obviously they don't see eye to eye, even though Coulson and Rosalind are just like opposites of each other, but at the same time they're the same type of figurehead. So that conversation that they're having at the beach is just like two Coulsons, one male, one female, but essentially the same type of idealist that's going for the same goal, except for different reasons. Coulson actually wants to make a shield that people can rely on, unlike the one that was Hydra within its ranks. And Rosalind simply just wants to provide results so that her organization does not get shut down. And through the means of blackmail and extortion, unfortunately, Coulson has no choice but to join. Otherwise, that's Daisy's next. So this makes for some interesting, like I said, interesting drama. And I'm just hoping that, despite having said that they're not going to retread the whole thing with the other S.H.I.E.L.D. from Season 2, let's just hope that they don't actually go for it and fall and end up painting themselves into a corner and have no choice but to go with that plotline once again. But hey, who cares about the Inhumans anyway? You know what this means? ACTU versus S.H.I.E.L.D. in Halo 5 Guardians multiplayer. Bitch. Now, having said my piece about the whole Lincoln story, we then jump to two other things that happen in this episode that I feel could have either been saved up for their own episode or should have been the main focus of this episode, considering how the last one ended. The one that I feel could have been the majority of this episode, because of how we ended up with last week's episode, was the whole thing with Simmons trying to readjust to her former life after having spent that in that other dimension or that planet or whatever for like, what was it, like a month or two, or yeah, I think it was like 6 months. I don't know, it was like a month, between a month and 6 months or something like that. But Simmons trying to readjust and being scared of like the tiniest noise, and then breaking down in the restaurant. Man, it was just a heartbreaking sight to see. And the actress Elizabeth Henstridge just made it all the more sympathetic. I just wanted to give her a big hug. It's just like it's everything's gonna be okay. And just seeing her and Fitz holding hands throughout the lab, him walking through it, I could just, oh my god. You know, at first, back in season 1, I wouldn't have said this, but now I totally ship them. I totally did, because at first I was kind of getting tired of the whole, you know, unrequited love thing. But here, I can definitely see where they're going, where they're coming from with this whole angle. But what I really wanted to know or wanted to see rather, is the rest of the team focusing on Simmons, giving her a better, much more attention than just Fitz, because I understand that there's bigger things going on, there's the Inhumans and whatever, I'm trying to be understandable about that, but I almost wish like the episode would have opened with all them gathered around Simmons, making sure that she's okay because of how much of an integral part of the team she is, how she's like practically family, and yet we just open up and she's practically by herself, and everybody's like talking amongst themselves like she's not there, like, oh, Simmons this, and I don't know. I just wish that there was a warmer connection amongst the team when it comes to Simmons, and I feel like we could have seen more of that if maybe this episode solely focused on just that, because we opened up with that, but then we jump into the Lincoln story, and then from that we jump to another story that I'm going to talk about, and that's it. And I'm like, I don't know, because of how interested I was in this plot with Simmons by the end of last week's episode, I wish that was the focus of this one, and then Lincoln could have been saved for either the next one or the one after that, but oh well, we have to make do with what we got, and hopefully the ending of this episode with Simmons wanting to go back to the planet where she came from so that she can finally get some answers as to finally collecting herself is going to make for some very interesting stuff, and hopefully the next episode focuses on that. I haven't seen any previews, any of that stuff like that, but let's hope that the next episode will solely focus on that, because that makes things even much more interesting. And the plot that I feel could have definitely been saved up for another episode and basically have been its own full thing on its own would have been everything in this episode with Hunter and May trying to go undercover and find a way into the ranks of Hydra. Now, before I talk about this, I want to issue an apology. Last week's episode, I stated that May still didn't join up with Hunter even after that conversation. I was hoping that they wouldn't dance around that for too long. Unfortunately, for some strange reason, I missed the part where May actually did agree with Hunter and did decide to join with them within that episode by the very end. It might have been that conversation she had with her dad before, you know, getting up from the table, whatever, but it was at some point before the ending of that episode where she said, yeah, I'll join Hunter, and we do see the two of them kind of packing up and getting ready when they get the call saying that Simmons was rescued, and Hunter's like, oh my god, you're genius, Fitz. I don't know what went over my head, and I did mention in a review that I was kind of preoccupied that night. I gotta admit, I was still preoccupied, and I was kind of watching the episode without my full undivided attention like I usually do, so I might have missed it completely. I'm sorry about that, but I do take back what I said in that episode, my complaint about May not joining, because she did in fact join, and in this episode we see her and Hunter meeting up with this guy in this bar, going undercover with a really good outfit for May, because my god, can you believe she's 50? God, she is so hot. Anyways, let me jump out of my fantasy here. And a really weird haircut for Hunter here. He's looking like, it reminds me of Nicol Bellic from GTA 4. But anyways, they go undercover, meet up with this guy who gets them into like a fight club of sorts, and of course if they win this fight club, or at least Hunter does, then they'll be worthy of joining Hydra, and will hopefully get some kind of face-to-face meeting with the big guy, you know, the guy in charge, which is of course Grant Ward. And this entire plot could have made for this one-off episode that just focuses just completely on May and Hunter, because I felt like their material here, while good, it was good. I mean, the way it was demonstrated was great. I mean, that image of Hunter being all bloodied and that was in my opinion, that was pretty graphic, even for a PG-rated show that's on ABC, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, Marvel. He was as bloodied up as, actually he was even more bloodied up than Daredevil on a good day. From the next Netflix show. That was, wow, that was intense. Seeing him walking like that, I was like, ugh, that looked harsh. But that entire thing could have made for its own entire episode. And Hunter and May trying to figure out how they're gonna sneak in, and how not to get caught, that kind of thing. Made for some interesting banter, some interesting character beats. That all could have made for a really good one-off episode that just had to do with them and nobody else, and it's almost like its own little mini movie in some ways. And at the same time, it could have given us kind of like a taste, an idea of what the Hunter Bobby spin-off show could have been or might just be, because they keep saying it's on and off and back and forth. But should that show come to fruition, that could have been like a little idea of what that show's going to be, only this time instead of Bobby, it's May. They could have done that, but instead they kind of spliced their material into this episode, and I kind of wish that they would have pushed it. I feel like I'm in the minority here. I feel like this is my own personal preference, but I feel like this material could have been saved up for the next episode. And I feel like S.H.I.E.L.D. often does that. I remember them doing that a couple times in Season 2, and they're doing it again here in Season 3, where they just need to focus their material a little bit better. I feel like this is the only thing that could have been easily shoved to another episode, and then this one could have been dealing with Lincoln and Simmons trying to readjust, and then that's it. We could have had an episode just like the premiere where it was much more focused than this one, but that's just my personal opinion. To be honest, I will say that A Wanted Human is probably my least favorite episode of Season 3, but we're only 3 episodes in, and it was still a good one with plenty of good material. It just didn't grab me as much as the first 2, and I felt like some of the focus of the episode, especially when it comes to inputting the stuff in with Hunter and May, could have been saved up for another episode. And Simmons, I think, deserved much more attention, not only from the show itself, but also from her family members, so to speak, her team, than she actually got, besides Fitz. So I give A Wanted Human a low 8 out of 10. Like I said, it's my least favorite of the 3 so far, but it's still keeping up a good momentum, a good sense of pacing for the show. That one that S.H.I.E.L.D. initiated back in Season 2, where they're like, hey, we gotta get this stuff done quick. But let's just hope that they don't repeat themselves with certain plot lines, like the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. versus other type of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Coulson, and going through these notions again with Lincoln of him being on the run, and hopefully do something much more interesting with his character. I mean, maybe he comes across the people or person that's actually offing humans. Maybe he confronts him. I don't know. That would make for some interesting stuff. But let me know what you guys thought of this week's episode, and I'll see you guys next week with my review of the next episode, which happens to be called Devils You Know. Devils. Marvel, don't mess with me. Do not mess with me. I haven't seen any previews, but don't mess with me. That'll be pretty badass, if you know what I mean. But chances are they're not going to do it. They're just tonally completely different, so wishful thinking on my part. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.